This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. Welcome to the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm your host, co-founder, and editorial director of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, Jamie Bogner. My guest on the podcast today is out on the East Coast, Dino Funari of Vitamin C Brewing. Welcome to the podcast, Dino.
Thanks, Jamie. I really appreciate you having me.
I can't wait to talk to Dino about brewing IPAs, brewing fun beers like stouts and pastry stouts, kettle sours. They have staked out a territory for themselves in a very crowded market, South Shore of Boston, surrounded by fantastic breweries brewing fantastic beers. Figuring out how to launch a brewery and carve out their own space within that very competitive marketplace is something that we are going to talk about. Figuring out how to iterate quality and processes around beers is going to be another part of the conversation. But first, nearly 2,000 breweries across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico partner with G&D Chillers. Innovative modular designs and no proprietary parts propel G&D ahead as the premier choice for your glycol chilling needs. Breweries you recognize like Russian River, Ninkasi, Jack's Abbey, Samuel Adams, and more trust G&D to chill the beer you love. Call G&D Chillers to discuss your project today or reach out directly at gdchillers.com. Also, kickstart your innovation with Old Orchard Craft Juice Concentrates. Old Orchard knows that a strategic seasonal release calendar means higher margins, increased taproom traffic, and secured shelf space for your brand. That's why they collaborate with countless breweries on product development conversations year-round. With unique flavors like watermelon, rhubarb, pineapple, and plum, the possibilities are endless. Get your Old Orchard sample kit with free 6-pack cooler at www.oldorchard.com/brewer. So, Dino, these are some weird times for breweries, and they're certainly weird times for you as a somewhat new brewery, about a year and a half, 2 years old now, trying to figure out and navigate the kind of challenging world of how to sell beer to consumers, despite shutdowns and changing consumption patterns and everything else. Before we talk a little bit about that, I would love to just for you to walk us through that kind of arc of brewing history and how you got to where we are today.
So I guess it really started for me back in, I want to say about 1991 was when I first started homebrewing initially. I got one of those homebrew kits that everybody I think has probably had in throughout their history,
Sure.
And started brewing at home. Brewed a couple batches. The beer was awful, so kind of tabled that for a little bit and started making wine at home. And did that for about 25 years. And then probably about 8 or 9 years ago, kind of got back into it. One of my partners, Pete, and I had been connected through mutual friends and got to try some of his beer and really enjoyed it. And just said, hey, you want to start brewing? I'd love to, get back into it. So he started showing up at my house every Saturday and we started to brew, and we started with, 5-gallon batches, and from there, went to 10-gallon batches, and then my wife threw us out of the kitchen because it was getting too big, and with the boilovers, it started to get to be a mess. So we went out on the porch, got a burner, and I used that as an opportunity to get even bigger. So I went with a 20-gallon batch, kettle, and then from there, we realized that it was great until winter hit in New England, and we said, well, this is really not going to be too practical to be outside. And I had a basement downstairs that really wasn't being used, so poured a slab and turned it into a little brewery, and used that also as an opportunity to invest in an electric Blickman system. And we started with a half barrel system for that, and then actually ended up increasing it to a 1-barrel system, which we actually still use today as our pilot system. So like I said, it was about 8-9 years ago, and then just started brewing, and every Saturday we'd be there from say 6 a.m. till 8-9 at night, brewing different beers. And there were a couple of people that started hanging around, including my other partner, who's my brother-in-law, Josh, and then a few of the other folks, and then we just realized that maybe we're onto something, and we started to give the beer out. We were making it, and we had, we can only drink so much ourselves, and
Sure.
we couldn't sell it. So that started the whole mythology of the blue cooler that we had, and we would just we'd leave 4 packs of beer in the cooler out in my front yard, and friends would come by and pick it up, and then from there it just kind of compounded. I mean, they would tell their friends, and their friends of friends, and so on and so forth. And the next thing you know, there were people coming from all over the East Coast saying they were going to be in the area. And I heard if I leave a 4-pack of beer in your cooler, I can take one of yours. And it just became this whole story, which is really, really cool and fun. And we've met some great people. And it's great now because having the tap room and being an actual open brewery, to have the people that have been through the basement, if you will, to see that, and they see the cooler when they walk in, and everybody laughs. It's a fun story.
Yeah. So how did you decide to? I mean, obviously you've got people that are excited about drinking your homebrew, but that's a big step to go from that to let's open a commercial brewery, especially in a market with as many breweries, as many high quality breweries as Boston. What was the moment where you said, okay, now we've got to go pro with this thing?
It's weird. I had kind of immersed myself in the industry, and I became friends with a lot of different brewers, and it wasn't for the intention of, I want to do this to pump them for information to open my own brewery. I mean, truly, the intention really wasn't there to even open. And then we started to brew the beer, and I'd ask questions, or I'd have people try beer, and I'd get little tidbits of information, or ways to improve. And so we would try that, and then it was like, oh, okay, this is better, and every batch would get a little bit better. And then we entered a few contests, we won, and we said, okay, well, maybe there's something here. And then we just kind of had a heart to heart with ourselves and said, this might be something that we could follow. And being from the Northeast here with so many great breweries, it's very intimidating, because you say, well, is your product, is it good enough to compete with those? Is it something that people would actually come out and buy? And I think we had a really great opportunity to give away all that beer through the years and have people give us their honest feedback. I used to say, like, don't tell me the good stuff, tell me the bad stuff, tell me what's wrong with it.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way we're going to improve, right? We can always, make the same bad beer if we don't know any different. And to get an outside perspective, it really helped. So when we started to get, good feedback and then better feedback, and then, we'd start to see the same characters come through and know that, okay, it wasn't like they just came through once, tried it, took a sip, spit it out, and drain poured it. These people were actually, looking for it and wanting more of it, and telling their friends, you got to get some of this. So we said, all right, maybe there's something to it, and let's go with it.
So then talk to me about how you went from that step to actually getting a brewery up and running and operational.
Boy, that was the dark ages. The worst, probably the hardest. The hardest part was
thing, right? Just happened.
Sure. It happens overnight. So I think that probably the most painful part for me personally was having to write a business plan. I'm not very good at sitting in front of a computer for days, just writing and writing and writing. But we did. We went through it, and we wrote. I've spoken in other outlets about the inspirational talk I had with Peter Bissell, and how he just said, if this is what you want to do, you're going to have to follow it, and here's what you kind of need to do. And we did. And from there, the next thing was like, all right, so we don't have any money. So it actually takes money to open a brewery too, in case anybody was wondering. So we said, well, what do we want to do? We didn't want to go the investor route. We wanted to kind of control our own destiny. We didn't want to be beholden to anyone. And with 4 of us, there was enough chiefs, if you will. So we said, all right, let's see if we can talk to some banks about financing. So we first started off going the local bank route, and nobody really wanted to touch us. So then we had reached out for one of the larger banks through CBC that focused on, say, breweries. Well, that was a learning experience, because they were like, yeah, we do breweries all the time. However, we're really not interested in startups. So we said, well, we want to hear your story anyway. So it was good, because it gave us an experience to actually have to talk to the bank, have to sell ourselves, explain our whole business plan, explain everything that we were thinking we were going to be able to do. So we went through the whole thing, talked to them for about an hour, and they were like, "This is great, we love it, but we can't help you." So that was like the crushing blow, or the first crushing blow. They said, however, we do have another bank that we know that we're friendly competitors with, and although they probably aren't at the level we're at, in the sense that we're more of an expansion bank. So you've already been an established brewery and you want to go to the next level. We're the people to talk to. You're a startup, you're a small brewery. That's who they were targeting. So they put us in touch with them. We had an initial conversation with them, and within 20 minutes, they're like, "Yeah, we love it. Let's do this." So that was really like, wow, this is happening. So so we did that, and then from there, it's like, oh shit, we don't have a building. We need to find a place to actually put this brewery. We had been working with a real estate agent, and he just said, there's a building that came or a property that came available. Would you like to take a look at it? We said, yeah, absolutely. So we did, and come to find out, it was two buildings. And we drive up, and it was like a front to back, and I see this back building, and I see these two big garage doors in the front to roll up, and I was like, I didn't even have to look at the building at that point. I was like, this is it. Like this, I could just visualize those doors being open in the summertime, and the tap room really coming outside and having that certain vibe, but that dusk vibe, if you will, with some nice lighting and all that, and we just said, yeah, this is going to be home. So we worked out a deal with the landlord, and took the space, took possession, and then probably 11 months later, I think it was, almost to the day, we opened.
So talk to me a little bit about the space. I mean, it's it's wide open. There's really a low key vibe to it that almost feels, again, compared to some of the flashier, more built out breweries, kind of feels like what craft breweries felt like 5-10 years ago. Is that an intentional thing, or talk to me a little bit about the way you've envisioned that experience?
For us, I mean, the whole vibe of it. I mean, hey, listen, vitamin C, right? I mean, we started, where I live is a little beach town, and that was kind of where we had hoped our home was going to be. So, ending up in an industrial park, I mean, there's only so much you can do, right? It's not like you can have too much flash. So we loved the feel of having a little bit of rusticity and still having that industrial feel too, and still trying to kind of give it a little bit of a beachy feel without it being tacky. So, we try to utilize woods where we could. We still have some nice corrugated metals and things like that. And then just really with some different accent type stuff to give it that feel. And it's nice. Yeah. It's almost like a campus, right? We've got roughly 12,000 square feet total between the two buildings. And then we've got a really large outside seating area as well, which is a plus, because we've seen in the warmer months, I mean, really all year round. I mean, if it's not snowing out, people are sitting out there.
So, tap room, obviously selling beer to people, giant patio, big open space. I mean, that's a big part of your model. But you do also package beer, and talk to me a little bit about how, given the current circumstances, how you guys have pivoted and tried to figure out how to operate and still make beer and get beer to people, in the kind of current environment.
I think the biggest thing for us was, I mean, primarily all of our beer, what prior to this was all being sold through the tap room, right? I mean, between having the draft lines and then canning the majority of the beer. So what we did is we just said, all right, as quickly as we could, we said, all right, well, let's start just canning everything off the big production system instead of pulling off 10-15%, whatever it was, for kegs. So that helped to increase our case counts, and then we said, if we can continue to do this and then pivot on our pilot system, which we still use, which was what really feeds the tap room too. We said, all right, well, we'll kind of shift, and instead of doing the hoppy beers, because without having an end in sight, not knowing, we figured we'd start working on some bigger stouts and lagers and some other beers that had a little bit more of a lifespan to them.
Sure. So
that way we could kind of stockpile for when the end does come. And then again, still get as many cans as we could out the door. So it was certainly a shift and a little bit different from what we were doing, but not like a complete wholesale change.
Yeah. Yeah. So how now do you do process sales and get people beer in this kind of no contact world?
Yeah. So what we did is, the roll up doors that we talked about earlier, those are open when we're open. And we've kind of barricaded off the front of the building that way. And we've set up multiple POS stations right there. So people walk up, we're doing touchless transactions. We're still getting a little bit of a line. People have a for some reason have a tendency to want to line up prior to opening. It's really not necessary. It's really not necessary.
You can't. Some behavior you just can't change.
It's line culture. It's line culture where people are conditioned up here. So,
but you got them 6 feet apart.
We do. We mark on the parking lot. Like we've got X's on the cement, every 6 feet, and we get everybody spread out, and we're getting them in and out real fast. So usually within the first 15, 20 minutes, I mean, it's just, okay, onesie twosies. And it stays steady like that throughout the day. And we're moving through cases, and the biggest thing for us through this whole thing was, oh man, I hope we're able to keep everybody working. Right. And knock on wood, we've been able to do that because the community's just been amazing. They've really come out in support, and everyone's working. Everybody's getting their hours, so it's great.
Well, that's a bright spot in a difficult world right now. Obviously for breweries everywhere, maintaining the both the safety of staff and the safety of customers, and also maintaining good optics around that, are all important when, the last thing the breweries need are photos of tons of people lined up, in this kind of environment. And so trying to change that kind of culture, get people to show up steadily, reassuring them that you're not going to sell out in that first hour and you'll still have some beer for them later on, has to be part of the kind of messaging program, I'm guessing.
Yeah. I mean, last week was kind of a weird situation for us. On Saturday, we opened the day with like 185 cases and we sold out in 2 hours, which was really that's never happened before. So that we were kind of like looking at each other like, what do we do here? And we had to close. I mean, we didn't have any beer.
Yeah.
So, that was it's been a nervous week, because of that. We truly hope that that's not the norm. And that, we have enough product to make it through the weekend. So,
well, that's a different perspective on that. How have you considered actually increasing production to meet this kind of takeaway demand? I mean, I think there's a question there in the back of the minds of every professional brewer right now, and that is, are people hoarding because they expect it to disappear at some point and not be able to do this? Or are they actually consuming that much and replenishing their stock? And is this a sustainable kind of production level for what we do? Because, or is it, are we selling this because other breweries aren't able to produce this at, consistently? And so, these consumers are going to where it is. There is that question in the back of the mind of everyone. How do you answer that for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, it's not like we're the only ones around, right? So I think there's 11 breweries in this 40-mile stretch of highway that we're on. So there's plenty of beer, and everybody's doing takeaway.
And delivery and everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. Delivery and online ordering and all these other things. I mean, we're always saying, in a crazy time like this, I mean, should we be looking at adding, tanks? I mean, is that even feasible? And I guess, we've always said, hey, listen, we're going to try and grow organically. We don't have to be this 10,000 or 15,000, barrel brewery a year. We don't have to be. I mean, I've talked about it in the past. Like, I don't know how big we want to get. I know that I still want to maintain a certain quality of life. I know that family is very, very important to me, and having little ones at home. I mean, I'm away from them enough, and it's like, I don't want to miss everything, and it's not all about the last dollar for us. It's just not. I mean, we don't want to be huge, and we don't need to be. So sure. Again, going back to what's the right number? I don't know. I mean, is 300 cases in a weekend, the right number? Is 500? Is 1,000? I don't know. I mean, I guess at some point, I guess what I'll call quote unquote the novelty of us, maybe that'll wear off because we won't be the new thing. And I don't know. I mean, but it's a year plus in here already, and there's no signs of slowing down. It's still moving right along. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's scary because we also wonder like what's going to happen when the tap room's able to open back up. I mean, what kind of crowds will we see then?
Right. And what do you have to then do to manage the experience so people feel safe and comfortable in that environment? Sure. How do you manage crowds through that? Like, do you need to keep groups of 10 separate from each other by a certain amount? Like, I mean, even thinking about bathrooms and every surface that anybody's going to touch in there and how you keep those clean. I mean, that's a whole lot of things to consider.
It is. And we've been thinking about this since the beginning. I mean, if they come back and say, I mean, I personally, I wouldn't feel comfortable being able to open the tap room back up right now because I just don't think that we have a handle on everything. And it scares me. I mean, we want people to be safe and not safety for us, our staff, us, and for our customers as well. And, if they come back and say, well, you can open your tap room back up at, 20% of your capacity or 50%. I mean, it's just not, I don't know. It's not worth it at that point. I'd rather just continue doing what we're doing and, take a pause and know that, all right, we're truly going to open back up when it's, we know it's safe.
Yeah. That's a fair and a cautious approach to this. Let's pivot and talk about beer and your approach to brewing. But before we do that, this episode is brought to you by Hopsteiner, your premium hop supplier dedicated to delivering quality hops and hops products in every package. Visit hopsteiner.com for a complete list of offerings or select Shop Hops to start ordering today. Also, Fermentis is the obvious choice for beverage fermentation. They've provided the beer industry from large and small breweries to home brewers with the best fermentation yeasts since 2003. Their yeasts are easy to use. Just pitch your Fermentis yeast directly into your wort. No rehydration necessary. To learn more about how Fermentis can improve the quality of your fermentation and for the latest on their exciting new product releases, visit fermentis.com. So the bread and butter of what you produce, Dino, is New England IPA. I mean, that seems to be the largest volume and, what consumers want to buy from you the most. It's no surprise you were right there in New England. It's you're at ground zero for that kind of style and how it developed. Talk to me a little bit about your experience with that, how you've watched, how you got into brewing that kind of style and how you've watched it develop over the years that you've been brewing it. And then we can talk a little bit about, where you've been going recently with that.
I guess for me, it was probably having that epiphany moment of for the very first time trying a Pliny the Elder, right? Or trying a heady topper back in the day. And it was just like, what is this? Like, I've never had a beer that tasted like this. I didn't know what this was. And, I don't know if Pliny was more of the kind of the gateway of going from West Coast to New England style, in the early days. I don't even know how you would categorize that beer, but it was it was life-changing. It was life-changing for me. I had the opportunity someone had brought some back from California and I was just like, wow, like I want to make this because this is what I want to drink. Right.
Yeah.
And from there, if you go back to those early days, making the trek up to Vermont to get Heady Topper or to go get Lawson's beer. Those were beers that were just amazing. And I was so fascinated that how do you get beer to be like this from a mouthfeel standpoint to just the way they utilized hops. So that was kind of where the focus was. And that was what we, when we started homebrewing, we wanted to brew those types of beers. And we did. And then we just, and thankfully that's, we weren't the only ones that felt that way as far as, wanting to drink those beers. So that's kind of what was out there. And then between Hill Farmstead and Treehouse, Trillium, there's so many. And then you got, all the folks up in Maine. There's just so many different examples of great New England IPAs here. And so there certainly was a blueprint there.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, that's what we enjoyed to drink and that's what the public wanted. So, ideally, we want to give the people what they want. And I think they're all a little bit different as it's not like it's just, it's another New England IPA. I think our beers have a certain thing about them. And I think, others same way.
Let's talk about that certain thing. Figuring out how to construct a style that feels personal and, in the midst of this bigger thing that consumers have expectations about is a particular challenge that brewers everywhere face. You don't want to make the same beer as, the brewery down the road from you, even if you're brewing it in the same kind of style. And, honestly, no matter what you do, given the systems that you're brewing on, given your approach to ingredients and who and how you order from, you're not going to make the exact same beer, but figuring out what that point of view is going to be and how you're going to create that is a challenge that every brewer kind of faces. Like, how do you create? And so as you were thinking about this, as I imagine this is a long period of development over many years of brewing and trying to find that voice. Talk to me a little bit.
We're still trying. Yeah.
Still trying to find.
Really. Yeah. I mean, really.
Talk to me how you work through that, and what that process looks like for you and what it did look like, how, where you started, some of the things you found that you didn't like and how you've over that time kind of sculpted this approach that is yours.
I mean, I think part of it is just, it's like you've kind of thrown the book out of brewing, right? Of what we've all been taught. And, from almost 30 years ago, it's just brewing is different now. The beers are different. I mean, at base level, brewing is the same, but there's just no room for being conservative. It's like, let's push the limits. Like, what's too much hops, right? Like how do we know, and using them at different times and doing different things with temperatures and, adding different, whether it's oats or things like that. I mean, like I said, it's everything. Every one of our beers is a work in progress, right? So we'll release a beer and people will love it, and we'll just kind of say, all right, well, this is okay, this is good, but what can we do better next time? Like I wish it had a little bit more mouthfeel, or I wish it was a little bit hazier, or I wish it had more of a nose to it. So there's always something that we're trying to improve. So it's unfair for me to say, like, this is where we're at, because a year from now we could be having a different conversation and the beer might be completely different.
Are there some ways that you brewed some of these IPAs a year ago or 2 years ago, even at homebrew scale, that you have moved away from because you have found better ways, or ways that better is not the right word for it, but ways that you like better about how to make those things, or things that have kind of improved or tweaked some of those processes?
Well, it's funny. It's funny. I mean, we kind of always treated, even at the homebrew scale, like with the equipment we had, we always treated it like we were going to be a professional brewery, right? Like we made a lot of modifications to our equipment. I'm sure, between Blickman and SS Brewtech, they'd probably come see our equipment now and say, boy, why didn't we think of that? Like just adding different ports and different valves and things like that. We're fortunate. My partner, Josh, is a welder by trade. So I was like, boy, it'd be great if we could have, a port to put CO2 on this. So when we're dry hopping, we don't have to worry about any oxygen, things like that. And it's like, I come in a day later and it's installed. Right. So, the big thing for us is when you're homebrewing at the 5-gallon level, like, you're putting it in a bucket and opening the bucket and just exposing it to oxygen when you're doing your dry hop or when you're doing your sampling and things like that. And I mean, everything now is all closed, right? Closed transfers, minimizing, any contact that things have, just having more regimented procedures. I think that's probably the biggest thing. I think water is a very, very, very important thing for us. We pay more attention to that. As far as treating our water. Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that. Where did you start, and what did you find started making a difference in terms of water chemistry for you?
Well, I think that we have, very inherently soft water where we are already. But, we're trying to achieve a certain pH and that requires treating it a little bit. So, everything goes through a sand filter and then we add back in the things that we want to give it that mouthfeel. And I think that's one of the things that people notice about our beer is that it typically is not on the thin side. It typically has a softness to it. And that's the stuff that I've always enjoyed from other breweries is having that good mouthfeel. I just feel like a nice beer that has some body to it without necessarily being a boozy big beer. I think it's enjoyable.
Is there a particular approach to those what sulfate chloride level or which specific salts you may use in that process that you found impact that? Or there's always you're riding a fine line with this too, because there is building that kind of body and width to the the beer using that water chemistry, but it's also possible to go overboard and end up with a kind of chalky, unpleasant beer that kind of has that kind of aspirin taste to it. How do you ride that line and and get it right where you want it?
I think there was a lot of trial and error, to be honest with you, initially, and really that even started at the homebrew level. I should, if I go back a little bit. We started playing around with water back then, and just adding in things like calcium and gypsum, and getting to that level that we want. There's still things that we're messing around with that I think could make a change too, but it's all a work in progress. It's funny because we'll talk to other breweries when we do collabs, and they'll say, well, what are you putting in? And we'll tell them, and they're just kind of like, what? I've never even thought of doing that much. And so, and I guess that goes back to, I have a conversation the other day with someone, and it's like, you're putting how much, in your whirlpool for hops? Like, we're only using like 25% of that. And they're like, oh no, this is what we do. So there really is give and take. And that, I guess that goes to a good point of us being a very collaborative brewery, is that we're learning a lot, and we learned every time we brew a beer. We'll gain a friendship, and also learn a ton about processes, and always try to pull one or two things that we can try to implement ourselves in our processes. So
for sure,
because we certainly don't we're not 100% set in the way we do things, and I think that's the beauty of this industry, is it's always evolving, it's always changing, right?
Yeah. So to keep harping on the water thing, you alluded to pushing a lot more into your water treatment than may be typical. Are you open to talking about what those numbers look like?
I don't know how, it's hard for me to put it into a specific, but I would say that our the amount of grams that we're using of say calcium chloride, we're over a gram per gallon on our chlorides, and probably a half a gram per gallon on our gypsum, which seems to be a good amount. So for what we're hearing, yeah. And then we're also using some Kanban tablets as well. But right. But other than that, it's pretty cut and dry.
Talk to me a little bit about kind of grist and building a malt body for these. Obviously with that kind of New England style IPA, getting that kind of full mouthfeel, putting a lot of high protein malt into the beer in order to kind of create that stable haze. But also keeping it light and allowing, with a little that sweetness to kind of highlight some of those fruity and tropical hops characters. All of those are kind of components of the malt. How do you think about malt, and what do you find yourself going to in building grist recipes for IPAs?
So for us, I think the biggest thing is, a 2-row is our backbone, right? So we always use that as our backbone of our recipes. When it comes to our IPAs, we like to have real clean malt bills. We use a lot of flaked oats. We use a lot of golden naked oats too. And then we will typically use. Are there some
percentages that you typically use? Yeah.
I would say that 15% is a good amount. You could probably go higher than that. Obviously you're always have to worry about a stuck mash too, but. Right. Which has happened to us, but we've done some recently where we've been as high as 30%, and it's worked well. So, and then we'll use other things like I said, Golden Promise, or even some Carapils. SRM is a big thing for us. We like to have that lighter color.
Right.
We like almost more of a yellowy grapefruity type color as opposed to that darker orange. But that's just personal preference. It's just the way we like our beer to look. It's, people have grown accustomed to seeing that, and that's kind of what we have a feel for.
Do you talk about what, yeast, or do you use a single yeast strain for these beers? Do you play around with mixed pitches? Do you switch it up from brand to brand? What's that kind of yeast approach? And then we can start talking a little bit about biotransformation and whatnot after that.
So we're still at the point where we're fresh pitching. We just have not had the time to start harvesting and going through that whole process. It's something that we will be doing at some point down the road, but for now it's fresh pitching. And we use a variation of a London Ale, London 3, and that seems to work well with us. But we've used others. I mean, we've used some dry yeasts that we've had success with too in the past. And I think when we first started, we were using a Conan strain that seemed to work real well for us too. So, but we've really settled on the that London 3 strain that really seems to work well with our beers. So,
what do you like about it?
I don't know. I mean, it it flocks nice, and it's a workhorse, And for our range, I mean, it's tried and true. So for us, not having to worry about having the haze drop out, that's been a big thing for us. I mean, we know that we're going to have a safe pitch, and it's one less thing that we have to worry about.
Let's talk a little bit about that kind of dry hopping process then. Obviously a lot of breweries are throwing in mid-fermentation dry hopping these days, and and seeing a difference that they can define in a sensory kind of way. For you guys, what does that process look like? Obviously, if you're not repitching your yeast and if you're doing fresh pitches every time, then the concerns around being able to harvest, aren't really there. You have whatever option you want at that point. But how do you find yourself typically doing it?
So we pretty much will do our dry hopping once we hit terminal. We have done some
old school
pitches.
Style.
Yeah. We have done some where we'll dry hop at high krausen, but that's been more of just doing some testing type stuff. So nothing that we've decided to implement, on a full-time basis. But so at terminal, we'll do our dry hop, and we'll typically do a 4-day dry hop. That seems to work well for us.
Yeah.
Temperatures? We'll pretty much dry hop at like 55 degrees.
Okay.
And we'll keep it there for, like I said, about 4 days.
Why so cold?
It just seems to work well for us. It's just, again, some things that we've picked up through the years, so bits and pieces from our elders. Yeah. Sure. That's as far as I can get into it without losing some key resources. So, which are very, very important to us. But
okay.
But it seems to work well. And then we'll crash and dump and transfer and carb, and we're good to go.
I want to talk to you about hops, specifically, but before we do that, this episode is brought to you by Brewers Publications, publishers of Small Brewery Finance by Maria Pearman, How to Brew by John Palmer, and the forthcoming, actually now available, Historical Brewing Techniques by Lars Marius Garshall. Established in 1986, Brewers Publications has published more than 50 books of enduring value for amateur and professional brewers alike. Visit brewerspublications.com today to browse the complete catalog of books and ebooks. Also, Craft Beer and Brewing's All Access subscriptions give you a year of the print and digital editions of the magazine, plus access to our library of video courses, a special deep dive email only for All Access subscribers, premium content, and All Access exclusive merchandise. Go to beerandbrewing.com and click on the subscribe button to join now. When it comes to specific hops varieties, obviously these are, a major kind of constructive element that all brewers are considering as they're making these styles of hazy IPAs. Everyone's using a lot of the same ingredients. They're using similar hop varieties, trying to, build something that still has a flavor that you enjoy that is somewhat different than other people. Using the same kind of ingredients is its own challenge. Talk to me a little bit about how what your evaluative process looks like around hops varieties, how you envision making blends of these things, how you kind of check on the back end to see if what you thought it was going to be, came out the way that you expected it to, and then what that kind of iterative process along the way looks like. If things in the tank aren't tasting exactly the way you want it, how you might be able to kind of tweak midstream and get things where you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes back to being fortunate enough to have the pilot system that we do have. It's a lot easier, and although painful, it's a lot easier to have to dump a 1-barrel batch as opposed to a 10-barrel batch.
Sure.
I don't think there's enough time in the day to try all the hop combinations that I'd like to try. I'm a hop junkie when it comes to that stuff. We're always looking for experimentals. We're always looking at different combinations, different ratios, just to see what kind of nuances that might create in the different beers. But like I said, we're able to try different things because we have that pilot system, and we can turn these beers around in 2 weeks on a pilot system and not have to wait, the full 3 to 4 that we would on our large system. And what we'll do is we'll test, different combinations, try them out. And, back prior to the pandemic, we were able to put those on tap in our tap room and really get a lot of live feedback from people as to, whether they liked it or whether they didn't. And, that's where things like Untapped were useful for us because, we could see what kind of feedback we'd be getting on these different types of beers. And, listen, we're everybody loves Citra, everybody loves Galaxy, and so do we, and those are found in a lot of our beers. But there's so many other options and so many other different hops that are out there that we'd love to try and implement. Everybody's looking for the next thing, right? And that includes us. So we're certainly not slowing down anytime with that. I'm always in the hunt for something new, and I'm a sucker for tropical fruits and citrus. When I see that, it's like, all right, we got to try this.
How often were you brewing on the pilot system for these kinds of beers?
We're brewing like 6 days a week, actually, and we're still doing it.
System?
So
6 days a week on the pilot system?
Oh yeah. We got like a farm of small tanks.
Are you crazy?
It's crazy. No, it's fun though. People come in, like we'll do collabs, and people come here and they're just like, they have envy. They have pilot system envy. Everybody's like, I got to get one of these, because it's true. I mean, we could brew 6 different beers in 1 week, and maybe it's the same grain bill, but maybe we've got 6 different hop combinations if that's the route we want to go, or if we're doing fruiteds, or if we're doing pastry stouts with different adjuncts. I mean, it's great. I mean, if we have the opportunity to even just brew a big batch on our big system and then split it into 4 or 5 or 6 tanks and do it that way. Not as often as we'd like. We're able to do that because it seems like we're always doing different beers. So, listen, we've probably been accused of being a one-trick pony, and that's all they do is make IPAs. But we do other things. We brew lagers. We brew cream ales. We're doing different things, porters, or like I said, fruited sours. So. It's fun to be able to do that and not have to. I know I can sell 30 barrels of one of our hazy IPAs. I don't know that I can sell 30 barrels of one of our cream ales.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Right? Yeah. Until that becomes the next big thing. So it gives us that flexibility.
A minute ago, you talked about seeking out new hops varieties. Are there any in particular, again, without blowing up your own supply potential for these that you've, and I know, everyone, they want to keep the secrets, and I get it, but you're going to put it on a label at some point anyway. So we're all going to know, and it's going to be in your Untapped description, I would assume also, because it's, there's that marketing element to it too. Are there specific hops or combinations that you've found really attractive lately, especially, and I think one of the interesting things in talking to brewers that I've found is just how many are finding ways of using older or less expensive or more common hops in some new and innovative ways. From your perspective, what are some of the kind of directions that you've gone with hops that you found are pretty interesting these days? Yeah,
it's funny. Like for us, we use a lot of the sea hops, right? So we're bringing back the Columbus and the Cascades and Comet and Centennial, hops like that 10 years ago, you'd find them in those West Coast IPAs, and here we are, we're doing them, and we're using those hops in our whirlpool and in our dry hop, and we're getting some real fun dank beers, and people are loving them, and it's funny because we're pretty forthcoming with the hops that we use, and in our descriptions, there's no secret, there's no hops that somebody else is getting that we're not getting, and vice versa. And the nice thing is that they're readily available, right? They're hops that you can get. They're not overly expensive. I mean, we're able to contract, pretty much all the varieties that we need. There are a few that we haven't yet, but we're working on it, and so we're always looking for different things. Citra, like I said, is probably the hops that you'll see most in our recipes. Yeah. But it's a good pairing hop, right? So we'll try and use that as the baseline hop, and then kind of accent with a few supporting hops in a lot of our recipes. BRU1 hops are a fun one. For us, a typical hopped beer between say whirlpooling and dry hopping is say 6 to 8 pounds per barrel, roughly. So a lot of them are 50-50.
Into what kind of ABV beer are we talking here?
Anywhere from say 6 to 8. That's kind of our sweet spot. Okay. For our hoppy beers, But we still mess around with what's the right amount? I mean, is a 4-pound dry hop enough, or are you going to get more if you do a 6-pound dry hop? Are you going to get more if you do an 8 or a 10-pound dry hop? Like, what are you actually getting out of it versus the money that you're putting into it? What's the return on that? So
no, and there have been there's certainly the studies out there that show that there is a declining utility after a certain point where in fact it can actually the additional oils and matter from that extra dry hopping can actually have a negative effects and decreasing the impact of those things. But and I interrupted you before. You're talking about building a base of Citra and then adding things on top of it. What do those kinds of percentages tend to look like, especially with some of the more classic hops?
I mean, I guess, a typical recipe might be a 50-50 split of Citra and say one other hop, or maybe 50% Citra and then 25 and 25. And there's others where we'll have a 75%. And I'm using Citra just as an example. It could be Galaxy, it could be Nelson, it could be whatever. But we're not ones to really throw 5 or 6 different hops into it, because at that point with such low percentages, I don't know that you're actually getting 5% of I don't know, whatever, pick a hop. I don't know that you're actually pulling that. You're getting 5% of Equinox hops. It's really coming through in the when you taste it. We try to keep things simple. We don't want to overcomplicate things. But we have other beers. We've got a beer that we've got like 10 different hops in. I mean, and it's just it was more of it. It coincided with what we wanted to do. We wanted to have fun with it, and it works well. I couldn't tell you that I'm getting, like I said, that I'm getting all 10 hops out of it, but it was a fun beer to make, and it's beer. It's supposed to be fun, right? Like, we don't want to take ourselves too serious.
No, and for every rule, you're going to find a way to break it. Just to see if that rule still holds. Are there any specific classic hop and new school hop combinations that you personally get a real kick out of?
I think I mean, again, for us, I mean, for the styles that are pretty prevalent that we're doing, we love using Columbus. We just love that in your face characteristic that it has, and when we dry hop with that, it's funny because it's just it smells like weed. I mean, it really, it's just like, wow, this is pungent. But I'd like to probably try to experiment with some other stuff at some point once we get some time, if that ever happens, and maybe start looking at some more of the noble hops and see what we can do with that, what kind of fun we can have with those, some European hops.
Let's pivot a moment and before we close out here and talk about your approach to stouts. Obviously pastry stouts and flavor forward kind of culinary inspired, dessert inspired stouts are very hot right now. And you guys have, definitely jumped into that, making this style of beer. Obviously they can sit longer in tanks and, people still love them. And I mean, I've certainly in this kind of environment, people want to treat themselves with, with fun stuff. I don't know about you, but I've put on a few pounds through sitting at home for the last 6 weeks.
Oh man, I don't even want to talk about it. It's awful.
I know.
It's awful.
I know. Talk to me a little bit. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about how, again, you kind of mark out your own territory with, in this kind of world of sweet culinary dessert flavored stouts.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's kind of like, well, how crazy can you get with pastry stouts, right? Like, what's the craziest things that you can put in there and maintain balance and have that sweetness without it being too cloying? But I would say for us, we're using a lot of the same resources, whether it's coffee or marshmallow or different types of cacao or dessert items. I mean, a lot of our pastry stouts are nut based. Whether it's almonds, roasted almonds or walnuts or you name it, peanuts. I mean, we've done some fun things with stroop waffles and with
So why nuts? Why specifically on that? Obviously, there's an oil component and a bit of a they add their own thing in addition to just flavors. From your perspective, why do you find yourself gravitating towards nuts as often?
I don't know if I'd say balance, or maybe just to kind of give you that perception of a nuttiness or a roastiness that seems to work well with chocolate and other items. We did a beer recently with roasted almonds and Biscoff cookies. As a former frequent flyer for Delta Airlines, it was like, hey, has anybody done this? Well, no, nobody has. So let's give it a shot. It worked well. What's
your process for using nuts look like? How do you maximize? I mean, nuts are an expensive ingredient to use in beer. Maximizing extraction out of them is a pretty important thing for brewers. What have you found that works well now? And, also oil in nuts has its own negative effects on beer and beer foam, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. We find with head retention is the biggest problem. We use real nuts. We try to stay away from the powders. We'll order them, big poundage of them online.
Yeah.
And we've got a 10-barrel brew house, and we typically will do 20 to 30 barrel batches. So for something like a 30-barrel batch, it's not uncommon for us to use around 100 pounds of whatever the particular nut might be, whether it's a roasted almond or walnut. And those are, we will try and buy them roasted. One of these days I'll invest in something to toast ourselves, but we just, we'll get to it. Sure, I need more tanks before I need more toys at this point. So
right. You buy them roasted, and what does that addition process look like for you?
It's a fun Saturday afternoon, typically of hanging a bag in our fermenter, and with a balancing act of trying to add those to the secondary fermentation. So, but yeah, we that's typically how we do it is in secondary when it comes to nuts.
Are there any, and in a bag too, are there any, kind of approaches or tricks you use to kind of help aid extraction through that process?
We would make sure that the nuts have been chopped or crushed. Just so that way you're getting the best absorption. Obviously you want to sanitize the bag. Before you hang it, you want to make sure you got CO2 on and get yourself a nice blanket before you add that in.
For vitamin C, obviously the future right now, we're all kind of wondering where things are going to go. And this, in the next 1 month, 3 months, kind of 6 month time frame, what do you look at as the immediate future for what you're doing? How you're looking at brewing, how you're putting beers on the brew schedule, and what are the next big long-term moves that are still kind of sitting there in the back of your head for vitamin C?
So I think for us, we always say, and it'd probably be a benchmark, if you will, it'd be is to be able to offer, say, a mixed case for people when they come in, right? So that so that would mean say 3 releases in a weekend. And that will require, a couple more tanks on our end, which, we're looking at right now. So it could be sooner than later. But I think that at that point, that's a good starting point for us to say, okay, what's next after that? Again, we were only open 3 days a week prior to the pandemic. So, does it mean we go to 5 days a week at some point? Does it mean we go to 7 days a week? I don't know. I mean, what can the market bear, and what can, how often do people want to come out? We have a really large local business during the weeknights where, we're not typically releasing cans, and people could just come in and hang out and have a beer or two, and it's the husband and wife or the coworkers, and it's a nice vibe on Thursday nights and Fridays. I don't know what the summer will bring, because it's going to be a new thing for us being open on the weeknights, and with the nicer weather and having the outside area, we could get slammed. I mean, we'll see what happens. Obviously, it's going to require us getting back to normal, quote unquote. I think the biggest thing for us is to try to continue to increase production, but at a rate where we're not sitting on beer, where we're not saying, all right, what are we going to do with this? Our model is that we don't want to sell our cans in retail, and we want everything. Sure. We want to be able to control the freshness and maintain the that level of product quality that we have, and not have to worry about it. So what does that mean? I don't know. Again, going back to, how many cases is that? What can we bear? What can the market bear here? And I don't know that we know that yet. So that's why, if we can come full circle, again, we want to try and grow organically and see let the market tell us what it is willing to accept and purchase.
So what does success look like for Vitamin C? When will you know that you've achieved it?
I don't know. I joke. I mean, success for me is being a dad, I think. Regardless of what happens in business, I feel like I'm successful. I've got a great family, beautiful children, a beautiful wife that could not be more supportive. We've got surrounded by great, amazing people. I mean, we're really one big happy family here, and everyone is just so engaged and so, such a shared vision. We're blessed. And I don't know, if we, and I guess that's part of the whole hesitation of getting too big, right? To the point where you've got hundreds of employees, and, I think you lose some of that. And we worry about that, because we don't want to lose who we are. We care so much about the quality of our product and making sure that, every batch is better than the last. So I think success would be, from a business standpoint, is, continuing to do what we're doing, seeing happy faces here, and always improving the quality of the product, and making every batch better, and staying true to ourselves. I think that would probably be success.
Yeah, well, cheers to that. Nearly 2,000 breweries across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico partner with G&D Chillers. Old Orchard are the industry's juice blending experts. Hopsteiner is your premium supplier for quality hops and hops products. Fermentist yeasts are the obvious choice. Brewers Publications has published more than 50 books for amateur and pro brewers, and Craft Beer and Brewing's all-access subscriptions are the best way to support this very podcast. Dino, if people want to learn more about Vitamin C, where do they find you guys?
So I would say we're probably the most active on Instagram and Facebook. Our webpage is pretty rudimentary at this point. It's a work in progress. We're looking at getting that updated. I don't even think it's got the correct hours on there right now, but very active, like I said, through social media. Through this whole pandemic, we've been doing these Wednesday night Instagram live, like virtual shares, which are fun. Nice. And I'll get on with some of our friends from Other Half, Equilibrium, and some other breweries, and we all, we'll sit and chew the fat for a few hours and pretty much, pick on each other and drink some great beers, and we'll take questions. Sure. So those have been fun, and they've been pretty educational, and I think people have really enjoyed those. So, things like that. And hopefully at some point just be able to get back to seeing everybody live in our tap room.
I can't wait for that moment. Yeah. Dino Funari, Vitamin C Brewing. Thanks, Vitamin C Brewing. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks, Gene. Appreciate it.
Yeah, cheers. This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.